Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm taking you to the Master League, where a trainer is running possibly the rarest Pokemon that I have ever seen played in the Master League, and that is a Shadow Shundo Lugia. Now, these battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Wendy X Apparel, so many thanks for the battle submission. While Lugia isn't the most played Pokemon in the Master League anymore, I do think it is still quite playable. One word of caution before we hop into today's battles. This is definitely a team for fun. This is not a team for climbing. This team is just to show off the Shadow Shundo Lugia. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. And in game number 1, we're off to a very neutral start, leading Ho-Oh into Meloetta. Meloetta will be able to outpace it is on quick attack, but Psyshock really not going to do a lot of damage. However, this Meloetta is packing Thunderbolt, and that does hit for some pretty considerable damage. Ho-Oh building up to the Sacred Fire, going for the Brave Bird. Brave Bird implies they're going to be pivoting out, and in comes Zacian. Meloetta farms up, in comes Shadow Ho-Oh, and this is a very big problem. Zacian farms up, goes for the close combat, but unfortunately mistimes it and lets an entire Incinerate through. Ho-Oh now going to get the farm down, but no, Zacian gets damage registration error. Zacian able to make a second close combat, and that forces the final shield away from the Ho-Oh. In comes Ho-Oh, opponent immediately firing off energy. Brave Bird takes the knockout, and it's 2-shield Shadow Shundo Lugia versus the world. Lugia has to shield something because every other Pokemon has been KO'd. Opponent goes for the Brave Bird and sends back in Meloetta. This is enough for the Thunderbolt. Shield comes up, and that proves to be a very wise decision. But Lugia is going to need an Aero Blast here. Meloetta throws, but I don't think this is enough energy for a Thunderbolt. Meloetta just settles for a Psyshock. I guess the opponent just wants whatever chip damage they can get, but by not committing to the Thunderbolt, instead of Lugia needing to Aero Blast to take the knockout, Lugia can now go for a fly and a farm down and exit with way more residual energy than it would have had otherwise. Back in comes the Shadow Ho-Oh, opponent refusing to reveal their final Pokemon, but they're going to have to show it here because this fly will definitely take the knockout. Fly lands, down goes Ho-Oh, in the back is Palkia, and this is a good day to have a Shadow Aero Blast loaded. Shadow Shundo Lugia Aero Blast rocks the Palkia, Dragon Tail gets the farm down, and that is a good game. We move to game number 2, and oh my goodness, what a lead. Ho-Oh into Metagross. Metagross not switching out either. These Incinerates are shredding. Metagross banks a Meteor Mash and then sends in Dialga. And they just have no response to Ho-Oh apparently. Ho-Oh full send Sacred Fire. That gets a shield, and that gets an attack drop as well. And if you thought Dialga into Zacian was absolutely pathetic, wait until you see a -1 Dialga into Zacian. That Iron Head does absolutely nothing. Zacian more than happy to absorb whatever Dialga throws, as Zacian looks to overfarm and connect with the close combat. Zacian looking to try and farm up to the back-to-back, but switch timer's up, and in comes Mewtwo. Mewtwo is an absolute blast from the past. I have not seen Mewtwo in ages. I assume if Mewtwo does end up getting the Mega released at GoFest, then we could at least see Mewtwo in the Mega Master League. It honestly feels a little bit nostalgic to see Mewtwo. Unfortunately, Mewtwo really does not do much in the Master League nowadays. Mewtwo ends up losing charge attack priority. In comes the Shadow Shundo Lugia, as it's able to get the farm down. In comes Metagross. It did bank a Meteor Mash from earlier. Lugia puts up the shield. Honestly, at this point, Lugia is really not going to be needed to win this game, as Ho-Oh will be able to secure the win. In comes Dialga, winning charge attack priority over the Ho-Oh. This should just be an Iron Head, but Ho-Oh is still going to be putting up the shield. Ho-Oh now going to go for the full undercharge, is trying to exit with as much energy as possible. That undercharged Sacred Fire not going to do much, does get another Sacred Fire debuff, and that means the second Iron Head is going to be doing absolutely nothing. Iron Head lands, Ho-Oh survives, exits with the Sacred Fire loaded. This game number 2 definitely felt like the Ho-Oh show. The opponent disrespected Ho-Oh and paid a pretty significant price. We move to the next match, picking up a terrible lead, Ho-Oh into Reshiram. Immediate save switch into the Shadow Shundo Lugia, and Lugia is going to be answered with Kyogre. Kyogre should have access to Avalanche, but Avalanche will not be enough to pick up the one-hit knockout here. Lugia is still going to be investing a Protect Shield as it farms up to the Aero Blast and looks to bait with the Fly. Fly from a Shadow Lugia would do a considerable amount of damage. Shield does come up from Kyogre. Now Lugia going to be full sending, looking to try and land an Aero Blast. Kyogre still has a Protect Shield. They do not use it, and they will get knocked out. That is a massive swing of momentum. In comes Kyurem. There's an aggressive pivot into the Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh gonna get absolutely shredded by a Fusion Bolt momentarily, but the good news is the Lugia has been preserved. This team is very ABA weak to Reshiram, so by sending back in the Ho-Oh, the Reshiram was able to be baited back out, and the only Reshiram counter on the team, Shadow Lugia, has been preserved. Now Lugia re-hits the field with energy to spare, able to make it to the Shadow Fly, and that is going to hurt. Reshiram takes big damage. There's a pivot into the Zacian, maybe trying to catch a crunch. I think just staying in with that Lugia and putting up the shield, it was a guaranteed win condition. But now, it should still be a win, but the path gets a little less clear. Reshiram Fusion Flare will inflict some pretty significant damage. Zacian, however, will be able to outpace and make it to the close combat. Close combat is going to be the end of Reshiram. Back in comes Kyurem. Kyurem is very healthy. Kyurem unable to get there. They lose charge attack priority to the Zacian, and that's going to be a win as close combat is massive overkill onto that Kyurem. We move to the next match, and unfortunately the leads are not getting any better as Ho-Oh now leads into Palkia. This is the downside of running a Pokemon like Ho-Oh, as Ho-Oh is very feast or famine. It doesn't really have a lot of neutral play in my eyes. It's usually hard winning or hard losing matchups. Shadow Lugia builds up to the Aeroblast, losing charge attack priority, but is going to go for the fly bait. And the bait is successful, getting a shield from Kyurem. Lugia now reaching for the Aeroblast. This will guarantee the final shield or deliver the KO. Aeroblast takes the knockout, switch advantage is 1, and that will win the game. But no, the pivot out back into the Ho-Oh. Unfortunately, that game was completely won off of alignment, but by pivoting back into the Ho-Oh pivot was a really nice play last game because the team was ABA weak to Reshiram. In this game, it kind of just feels like it gave up switch advantage for no reason. However, the Palkia no shielding and letting the Brave Bird land means this game should probably be a win anyway, because now Zacian is going to get a big farm down. Zacian gets the full farm down, in comes Zamazenta, but no one move from Zamazenta will be able to pick up a one-hit KO. They go for Behemoth Bash, that does absolutely nothing, and Zacian just gets the farm up now to the back-to-back close combats. There's no way out for Zamazenta, close combat is gonna connect. They survive on 1 HP, but the damage is done. Zamazenta's Behemoth Bash lands into a Protect Shield, Zacian gets the farm down, and that's a good game. We've got a perfect mirror lead in the next match, Ho-Oh into Ho-Oh. Both Ho-Ohs are shiny, the opponent however has significantly less combat power, so the opponent might be rocking like a 14 or 13 defense here to make that happen. Sacred Fire is going to get the shield and get the debuff as well, that is quite nice. The shield will come up as the opponent's just going to opt to go straight Brave Bird. The opponent now taking a lot of damage from Incinerate. This Ho-Oh pretty consistently winning charge attack priority over the opponent. Brave Bird is going to be not landing. There's a double shield from the opponent. And this Ho-Oh is actually fully sacrificed as Brave Bird takes the KO. In comes Shadow Lugia. The opponent has their own Lugia. What are the odds that we see a Ho-Oh Lugia team against a Ho-Oh Lugia team? I feel like ABA Flyer is already very uncommon. In comes Zacian. Aeroblast thankfully does not get the boost. And now Zacian will look to hit back hard with Behemoth Blade. Behemoth Blade is going to land. Lugia is so incredibly bulky. It's able to shake off that Behemoth Blade, no problem. They can even make it to a second Aeroblast, and Zacian will put up the Protect Shield. The worry, however, is always going to be the Ho-Oh. In comes Ho-Oh. Zacian fires off that Behemoth Blade, but that really does not do a lot of damage. In comes Lugia. Combination play forced to fire off the fly because Behemoth Blade failed to take the knockout, and Shadow Shundo Lugia is still at full HP, but thankfully there is a Groudon in the back. And it looks like the opponent has just given up. They could have stayed in, maintained switch advantage, and been in a very good spot, but they pivoted out for no reason, and that just cost them everything as Aeroblast takes the knockout, and their Lugia is going to get fully Dragon-tailed down. The opponent being switch happy cost them everything. Great lead in the next match, Ho-Oh into Xerneas. Xerneas, however, is staying in. If they're staying in, there's only one reason to do so, and that is Thunder. Oh no, they throw an alignment, and entire Incinerate goes through. This is why charge attack timing, learning it, is so incredibly important, because if you don't, you're just giving away so much free energy to your opponent. Giratina safe switch answered with Shadow Lugia, but that Shadow Ball hits for incredible damage. Lugia farms up, unable to make the Aeroblast, just gonna have to settle for the Shadow Fly. Fly shielded up by Giratina. Lugia able to make it to a second Fly, but the opponent wisely goes for the charge attack priority tie, and Lugia is just gonna let itself get knocked out. Now in comes Zacian. Zacian will take a pretty considerable amount of damage from the Shadow Ball and unfortunately cannot get a farm down before a second Shadow Ball will be reached. So this puts Zacian in an awkward spot. Zacian can fire off the Behemoth Blade and take the KO, but that means Zacian is losing basically all of the energy that it just farmed. There's a Groudon in the back. Opponent sends in Xerneas as the Ho-Oh hits the field, but the Ho-Oh has 100 energy. Sacred Fire will take the knockout. Back in comes the Groudon. Ho-Oh, already at another Sacred Fire, really has to hope for an attack drop, as these mud shots are adding up. Sacred Fire lands, no debuff comes through, Ho-Oh does not get there, and unfortunately there's only one win con remaining, and Wendy knows it, calling the bait. Wendy no shields, Fire Punch comes out from the Groudon, now there's actually a chance to win. Shield comes up from the Zacian. Precipice Blades is full sent. They could have just thrown the Fire Punch. I think they would have gotten outpaced even if they went triple Fire Punch, but they throw up Precipice Blades for no reason, and that made it a lot easier for the Zacian, as Zacian just ends up taking the win. Picking up a very bad lead in the next match, Ho-Oh into Palkia. Safe switch into the Zacian, answered with a Ho-Oh, and man, this is why, at least at Elos where Ho-Oh is played, Zacian is not a particularly effective safe switch. Behemoth Blade is going to do some decent resisted damage onto the Ho-Oh, and the threat of another forces the opponent to throw. That's amazing. But no, the Zacian puts up the shield. The Zacian did not want to put up the shield there and did not want to throw the close combat on alignment. Close combat will not take the knockout. Now Ho-Oh farms down. They exit with a bunch of energy, and they exit up a shield, and there's basically nothing in the back that could ever be a win. The opponent does go for a very surprising Sacred Fire. They should always go for a Brave Bird in that scenario to limit farm and just to lock in damage or guarantee to get that shield back. And the Palkia, I didn't even realize, is on Dragon Tail. So a lot to be surprised about in this game. In the back, it's Zacian. And Zacian, it was just going to be winning against the Lugia anyway. This is one of the reasons why Lugia is a significantly more difficult Pokemon to run. Xerneas is the far better fairy type to Zacian right now, but Zacian is still played a lot because a lot of people just haven't realized that. Behemoth Blade will be shielded, but there's just really no way Lugia can ever hope to win this game. Lugia losing charge attack priority on Behemoth Blade number 2. Lugia survives, but the damage is already done. There's still a Palkia. In comes Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is never going to be able to get that snipe down. Back in comes Palkia. Palkia's Aqua Tail is going to land. Ho-Oh is going to get farmed down, and that will do it. In comes Lugia. Aqua Tail available for the Palkia, and unfortunately, this game will end in defeat. We move to the next match, leading Ho-Oh into Ho-Oh once again, and again a purified Ho-Oh, but this time this opponent also has the Shundo. In the Ho-Oh mirror, I guess I would always go Sacred Fire, and I would probably always no-shield the first, because especially if you're able to get a debuff, you should pretty comfortably survive. The opponent ends up no-shielding, the debuff does come through, and I really like that no-shield. Opponent Sacred Fires as well, they both got the debuff, but the opponent's going to be winning charge attack priority. This is a little bit tough, because if you end up shielding the Brave Bird, then you put yourself in a spot where you kind of have to pivot out and give up switch anyway, because you're going to be at -3. But the opponent ends up putting up the shield as well. In comes Lugia, that's answered with Dialga, and Lugia will actually do pretty well here as the Shadow. Shadow Aeroblast, even though it's resisted, will add up quite considerably. Aeroblast is going to land, and Lugia actually gets the 2-stage Aeroblast boost. That is very nice. Shield comes up. Unfortunately, Dialga baits with the Iron Head. Lugia goes for the fly and should be able to force the opponent's final shield back. Unfortunately, Dialga will be able to make a Roar of Time, and Roar of Time is going to be lethal. Lugia will not be able to survive. Roar of Time lands, that takes the KO, and in comes Zacian. Unfortunately, revealing Zacian means the opponent now has a target for their Ho-Oh, but instead, they're going to bring Groudon. Ho-Oh switches in, answered with the opposing Ho-Oh. They will outpace, but they're going to have to put themselves at -3 defense to take the KO. That's the opening Zacian needed. Zacian going to commit to a full farm down and exit with so much loaded energy. The Groudon had a Fire Punch. Zacian has to hope this will not take the knockout. It does not, and that should be a win, as now Zacian's at the back-to-back close combats. Behemoth Blade would not have taken the one-hit knockout, but back-to-back close combats definitely will. The opponent tried to CMP tie there, as it would have been a losing CMP tie, and if you CMP tie in the first close combat, you can win the game. But a wise decision to avoid that charge attack priority tie leads to a win. Hopping into the final match, picking up a terrible lead, Ho-Oh into Kyogre. One of the reasons why, in my eyes, this is a team for fun rather than for climbing is this team is triple weak to Kyogre. Avalanche forces a shield, opponent sends it Ho-Oh, but Shadow Lugia immediately hits back hard with Aeroblast, and the Aeroblast lands. That is so much health lost, and they even get outpaced before they can even make a Brave Bird. If they want to hold on to this energy, they're going to have to give that shield right back. Ho-Oh throws on alignment, Brave Bird will hurt, shield comes up from the Shadow Lugia, but this Kyogre is going to be a pretty significant problem. The Lugia has quite a lot of energy, the opponent's going to be sending in Kyurem. There's going to be an aggressive pivot into the Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh trying to outpace. I believe this should only be an Avalanche. It shouldn't be enough. No, they're actually on Surf, but thankfully Surf does not take the knockout. I was going to say if it's not an Origin Pulse, so that should be survivable. Brave Bird lands, and Kyogre barely survives. Zacian snipes down with Metal Claw. It's going to be Zacian versus a Dragon Tail Kyurem Black. There is energy stored on that Shadow Lugia, which should be a help. Fusion Bolt lands, but the important thing is Fusion Bolt does not two-shot. Zacian does throw on slightly suboptimal timing there. I believe that was 2 in the move. Shield does come up. That's a lot of damage taken by the Kyurem, but Kyurem overfarms too much, playing to a CMB tie that they do not win. Close combat takes the knockout and secures the win. All in all, big thank you to Wendy for sending in these battles. Having a Shadow Shundo Lugia is just an insane collector's item. I believe they mentioned in their notes that they do actually have a background on it as well. So if it already wasn't rare enough being the Shadow Shundo Lugia, apparently there's a background on it as well. So very cool to see an incredibly rare Pokemon like that in action and picking up some wins. Lugia, I do think, unfortunately, it has probably more play at the ELO range that I typically play at than the ELO range that this player typically plays at. Just because in the ELO range that I normally play at, Zacian is basically gone. It's more so people running Xerneas, because Xerneas is actually a convincing answer to Reshiram and Zekrom, whereas Zacian loses to both of those. And Reshiram and Zekrom are widely considered to be the 2 best Pokemon in the Master League this season. That was the other thing that surprised me, is I normally don't get to see what the Master League meta looks like off of leaderboards, and there definitely was a pretty significant absence of Reshiram and Zekrom. I think maybe 1 Reshiram and no Zekrom. Thankfully, no Zekrom was a very good thing for this team, because this team was very, very soft to Zekrom across the board, but not seeing either one of those was definitely a bit of a shock to the system for me, just because of how frequently I am used to seeing them. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.